Welcome everyone to another episode. Today we welcome Donna Weber. Donna is the world's leading expert in customer onboarding. More than 2 decades, she's helped high growth startups and established enterprises transform new customers into loyal champions. Really excited to talk about that today, Donna. As a recognized thought leader, influencer, strategist, advisor, and author and speaker, Donna gets to the heart of customer success, which we're very passionate about what we do at Straight Out. Now, Donna's also an award-winning author as well, and she's penned the book Onboarding Matters. So we'll definitely talk about that, Donna. And first of all, welcome to Spotlight.
Martin, thanks for having me today. It's such a pleasure to meet you, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, very cool. And you actually are joining us all the way from beautiful California in the San Francisco area.
Yeah. Yes, it's a beautiful day here.
Yeah. And so you and I have had some really great conversations because I think we share a lot of the same values. And when we think about onboarding and clients and success and transforming them into, loyal advocates of what they do and what we do as a service provider, you talked about creating value, which I thought was probably a cool place to start. When you think about creating value, what do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, value is a 5-letter word. And I don't know if you're playing Wordle these days, but it's a great 5-letter word. So are you playing Wordle?
My mother just introduced my children to it.
Oh, yeah, we play it every day. Yeah. So value. So, the thing is, I work with a lot of great companies all around the world, and it's just fascinating. I mostly work with high tech, high growth startups. Yep. And it's just amazing, Martin, like all the different products that they're doing, all the different solutions they had for problems I never knew about. And, I was sharing with a friend last week, like, oh, I met with a company that does this. I met with a company that does that. It's really exciting. Yeah. However, in the world of, especially I think in the world of technology, because that's what I mostly connect with, I see everyone get really fixated on their products and they just assume that their product delivers value. But you really need to engage with the customer and deliver value to the people who are using your product. And that's what I am most passionate about.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because a couple of episodes ago, we actually had one of our clients on the podcast. And it was really interesting. And I was sort of sharing with you how much energy I get from these conversations. And I got to a point where they were speaking in such a way that they truly were achieving what they set out to achieve, and we'd help them do that. That's when I knew something. Yeah, the word amazing is a great way of thinking about it. That was amazing. Can I ask you a question? When we think about onboarding clients, what's the equation between how the company onboards clients and how the organization receiving the service or the product wants to actually truly commit to onboarding that service or product?
Well, there's a couple of things there. Most companies equate onboarding with implementation. So you might have a software or hardware tool, and they think that when they've gone live with the software or hardware, that quote, we're onboarded, check. And I say that implementation is a part of onboarding. So again, they're focused on the technology, they're focused on a go live. But that doesn't mean that just because I download an app on my phone, I'm trying to look for my phone, it's not up here. Oh, here it is. Just because I download an app on my phone.
So what's that, you download Straight Out? Is that what I heard?
Just because it's on my phone, let's say you tell me about a cool app to check out. Yeah. Just because I've downloaded it doesn't mean I'm getting any value from it.
Yeah, great.
And to be honest, I was looking at my screen, my home screens last week going, what is this app? I have no idea, because I've never used it. I've never got value out of it. So we need to look at not just onboarding for the company, and we need to deliver value to the company, whatever that means. They bought your product for a reason, generally to save money, to make more money, to save time, to be compliant. So we need to make sure we're helping them reach their success outcomes. But we also need to make sure we're onboarding individuals. Yeah. So let's say you might have this great technology solution for a company, but the reality is that it's people who are using it. And most companies really don't consider that they're onboarding people. They think they're onboarding a logo or an account or an organization or data, they're really, you need to address the onboarding of people.
Yeah, I love this. And so I'm trying to work out the best place to keep going here, because you and I could talk about a big topic. So let's start at the beginning of client onboarding. And this next gen spotlight is all around leaders looking at the way that they lead into the future, whether they're early leaders, they're a leader today, or they're an aspirational leader today, or a leader who has been in leadership for a while. I really want to get to the depth of, as we look to lead our teams to the client, what do we need to consider? So a question for you: at the front end of onboarding, what are the most critical elements to starting that journey on a positive note?
Well, I've spoken about and I've written about the neuroscience of onboarding.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that we all have, brains that work in a certain way. Whether you think your customers are rational, logical people or not, we need to engage them in a way that their brains work subconsciously. So we can't assume anything. So for example, we have first impressions. And the science shows us, and I am no neuroscience, but I'm fascinated by this, but science shows us that all customer interactions are not created equally. That first impression has way more significance than any other interaction, because what happens is the brain goes into confirmation bias. And so whatever that initial engagement is, people are going to repeatedly look through that lens to validate their initial judgment. In addition, when we first meet people, our subconscious brain is going friend or foe, safe. Am I safe or am I in danger? Fight. Do I need to go to fight or flight, or you're part of the tribe? So just like you and I took some time to connect with some small talk and shared values, shared interactions, then that helps us kind of, it slows things down and it helps us feel some warmth and connection. And so that starts to tell my brain, Martin's safe. I can, I'm not a threat here. Yes. So it's really important we take time, because during when companies buy your solution, when people buy your solution, they might be excited. You're assuming they're excited, but they might be filled with fear and doubt. They might have buyer's remorse. The buyer, the stakeholder, they might feel fear that their job or reputation is on the line because they purchased your product. So they might have things going on in their personal life that leaves them overwhelmed. So when we don't take the time to slow down and connect, and I'm talking about more of a high touch engagement, but you can do that in lower and tech touch ways as well, with welcome emails, with photos of people, to really help connect at a more personal level.
Yeah, I love that. And so when you think about the client side and the importance for them to, you talked about buyer's remorse. I mean, that's further on down the track, right? But you think about,
that might be earlier on, because it might be because they might be, ruminating. They might be going through prospection, where they're trying to kind of figure out, and so they may not really be present with you while you're trying to engage and onboard them, because their brain is spinning. So if you don't address some of that and provide, some small talk to connect, some cognitive closure to end the buyer journey and successfully start the customer journey, you may lose them from day one.
Actually, you just touched on a really interesting point. Even when you start to onboard, so whether it's low touch or whether it's high touch, you haven't really sold them yet. You're still going through the buying journey until you've truly onboard them. What's that transfer for you? When do we transfer over?
Oh, I think when you deliver some initial value. So when I work with companies, I have onboarding programs and onboarding audit, where in my master class, we look at, even if your product takes 6 days, 6 months, 16 months to implement, you need to start delivering value much more quickly. So it doesn't always have to be that value only comes from your product. It could come from your services.
Yeah.
It could come from, helping your customers develop the right mindsets to be successful with your product. So, I look at how we can deliver value ideally within 30 days or less. So
Yeah.
once you start delivering value, you're delivering endorphin hits, and the customers are going to be more excited that they're using your product, and they're going to be more willing to partner and collaborate with you to go through that whole implementation and onboarding journey.
Yeah, love that. And so, just from the seller side for a second, how much focus? Let's talk about leaders for a minute on the seller side. When we are talking to a prospect, by the way, whether it's via Zoom, face to face, or even via our website and our content and things like that, you talked about personalization a lot. How much emphasis would you put on a leader personalizing that with the buyer, or anyone personalizing that with the buyer?
Martin, in the last 10 years, the sales and marketing, the sales funnel, the buyer journey has come a long way.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot more companies used hope as a strategy. We kind of hope they we throw stuff out there, and we hope that it sticks and that they buy.
Yeah.
But over the last 10 years, there's through HubSpot, Marketo, Salesforce, data, there's this way that marketing teams know how to deliver the right content for the right user at the right time. They design a journey. They're driving behaviors and actions along the journey, and that will ideally result in a sale.
Yeah.
And so they've become very prescriptive.
Yeah.
And they use data to really understand what the users are doing. And there's account-based marketing. So if we want to talk about personalization there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what happens too often is the deal closes, and then companies use hope as a strategy for the customers.
Mm-hmm.
So I see a huge opportunity on the customer journey to create that same prescriptive, proactive journey where we deliver the right content for the right user at the right time. So on the buyer side, you might have, a prospect, and you might define your personas, right? But on the customer journey, you might have the buyer, but then there might be a project team consisting of admins, business analysts, executives. And are you delivering the right content for the right user at the right time to ensure each of those roles is successful in their jobs using your product?
Yes.
So we want to make sure the stakeholder looks good and they know they're getting value, but then there's also the users. They need to be onboarded as well. And that's where, a lot of companies forget that there's people using your product, and they might be touching upon it for a minute a day. They might be living in it for months at a time. That might be their main dashboard, but it needs to make sure that there's value for them.
Well, let's love it. And if you could give us 3 success metrics of sellers, what's 3 things? Yeah, that when they onboard, who are
for onboarding.
Who are providing the actual product or service. What's 3 things that they do that you've seen exceptionally well that helps them build loyal clients?
Well, some metrics. So are you saying metrics to leverage, or are you saying actions to take to drive those metrics? It could be both. Okay, so I'll talk about the metrics, and I'll talk about ways to drive them. So it depends on what's important for your product, But for example, driving product usage. Mm-hmm. So it's not just like, great, we've gone live, but you might want to be tracking product usage to see if they're using the product. Or if you're creating a customer journey where you're driving them to different use cases, make sure they're engaging in those parts. So then, therefore, if product usage is a key metric, ways to do that would be to have maybe branching email campaigns that really encourage some behavior, some action in the product. So for example, I was checking out a product. I signed up for the trial, and it said, great, you need to upload your contacts so we can create reports. Mm-hmm. And I didn't do that, and kept reminding me. So I got, dependent on my usage or not, I got reminder emails. There was links to training videos within the emails. Yes. Finally, they said, hey, maybe you don't have data. Here's a sample data list. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can upload that. So I uploaded that, and then I started getting new emails. Great work, Donna. You successfully uploaded your contacts. Now the next step is to create a report.
Yeah.
And so it was branching on based on what I did or didn't do.
Right. That's awesome.
There's also a lot of in-product guidance tools now where depending on the user, they can guide you to specific use cases. I think those are great. Self-paced content. So I think self-paced stuff is good. But it needs to be, it's not just like, let's give you a product tour. Let's just show you everything you might need to know about the product. It really needs to be specific. So that I am getting value and not just like learning. I don't care about the technology. I don't care about the product. I care about me and whether it's helping my life be any better. So you need to design like, maybe for an admin, they need to set up users, roles, permissions. Well, you better take them on that journey versus a financial analyst. They're going to have a different journey through your product. Yeah.
And you also touched on the other thing as well. Me as the consumer is I don't have the time to want to learn about everything.
Yeah,
what I want
too much. We don't want to drink from the fire hose or serve up a buffet. People want, a curated experience. And they want it delivered to them.
Yeah, and this is a great conundrum right now within every organization on the planet. It doesn't matter really how large you are, because if I'm using a single sourced app to do something and I'm getting value, but I'm now trying to collaborate with 50, 100, 200 people, 2,000 people, we're all bringing our own mindset of what the best way to work is, which is really interesting. So one element is how we get the technology and services on board, and then the other one was, well, everyone's bringing something of value to it, to the journey. How do we bring everything? And typically it's been a top-down framework. When we think about CRM,
right? When
we think about ERP, when we think about HCM, all these tools were bought at the company level and then said to the teams, well, this is what we're now using. And we didn't really get a choice, but that has changed a lot as well.
And when you think about it, the reality is that we're all consumers, when we're not in our quote roles, we're consumers who share what's working and what's not working. And generally we talk louder about what's not working. But, if you want your product to go viral, if you want to land and expand, then those users better be having a good experience, even though they might not be the quote official buyer.
Yes.
And the reality is every time you make a new sale, there's an opportunity for 3 sales: that initial sale, the expansion sale, and the referral sale. So if you don't get the onboarding right, you might get that first sale, that customer might renew, but you're missing that expansion and that referral revenue. And those could be exponentially bigger.
And as a technology company ourselves, we live on that, right? That's crucial to the success of our company, which starts with the first one. Our client success is the most important thing. As I said to you before, how good would it be to have a company where the client just leads the story? Right, because ultimately this is what it's about. It's not about,
well, think about like popular brands like Apple. People are like, well, one, people are way more willing to pay more, right? 2, I mean, I'm not like a first gen adopter, but of new technology, but a lot of people, but every time a new thing comes out, phone, whatever, iPad, they get the latest and greatest MacBook. They're committed.
Yes.
And that's what you want. I mean, people have a like huge, they have a personal relationship with Apple.
Yeah. Hey, just a question. I want to go back. By the way, I found a growth hack on Apple around the button at the back. Is actually
about the button. What?
The Apple logo at the back on the new phone is actually a real button.
Is it? What is the button for? I don't have the new phone. Mine's old.
Yeah, you can go through the accessibility thing and change it and
interesting.
Click on, brings the camera on. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
See, you're giving value
for those
right now.
First gen adopters. It's probably been around for 12 months. But it was something I just stumbled across this morning.
My husband has that one. I'll go check it out.
Yeah. Well, I actually grabbed my wife's phone and said, "Oh, check." Oh, yeah, you don't have that yet. She wasn't happy. Let's just put it that way.
Mine's the iPhone 10. I'm getting a little behind.
Hey, just a question on the client side. So what are some things that make a really successful client journey? They've obviously gone through the evaluation, or they've got a problem to solve, or they've got an opportunity to create. They've looked at where they can help accelerate that through a service or a product. and then they decide to bring it on board and rally the team around it. Can you give us some traits of those leaders who are making these decisions, and what makes a really successful onboarding experience on the client side?
Absolutely. So too often I see where a company will buy something and then the teams and the people who will be using it, who will be implementing it and using it, don't even know about it.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of gets just thrust upon them without consideration of what else is going on in their worlds. So as a result, the company who sold to them, they might face a lot of resistance. They might feel like, well, if we implement this, my job might be at risk because you may not need me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Or they may feel like, oh, I've got 5 other things I'm implementing or 5 other projects on my plate. I can't deal with this right now. And they can take that all out on the vendor.
Mm-hmm.
So what I like to do, and not, again, I don't use hope as a strategy,
Mm-hmm.
is I like to bake in a client alignment meeting or a stakeholder meeting or a customer handoff, call it whatever works best at your organization, where the stakeholder or the buyer meets with the project teams and helps them understand what was purchased and why.
Mm-hmm.
So that then that happens before the project kickoff. So then all the customer teams, they're like, oh, great. Now we know what was purchased and why, where they can share their concerns with the buyer or the stakeholder, and they're not resisting the whole experience.
Yeah. And so in relation, I love that. And I've seen it for 20 years. I've seen it happen. In relation to, I had a great example recently of a company that the leader, the CEO made the decision and then rallied well, it was really a leadership group from each of the divisions, right? And it was one stakeholder, but it wasn't always the head of that division. And I think this was very smart. And then they brought them in and said, hey, this is the reason why we're doing this. This is the potential objections we're going to get. We're going to share it with the team. But there's also going to be a percentage of the population that is just never going to accept what we're about to do. And this is what I want us to do. And once that was clearly articulated, it was like the advocate inside the advocate model, which was those stakeholders were truly ambassadors of driving change. Right. And when this girl took me through this, I went, that is such a cool model, right? Because it actually widened the depth of how do we make change happen. And then we can allow the actual business to evolve in a way that we ideally saw where it would be. What's some of the examples that you could share of that success? But I also then want to touch on, after we talk about a couple of success stories, I want to talk about when it really went bad and what could leaders avoid on both sides of the fence, right? On both sides of the fence to make sure that we delight the client, the customer.
Well,
early.
and anytime you're bringing anything new, it's good to have a change management plan.
Yeah.
And change management doesn't mean you announce it once at a all hands meeting. The brain needs to see and hear things over and over again to really absorb it.
Yeah.
So when I work with companies that are rolling out a new onboarding framework, we designed the rollout plan. And so it may be that it's announced, let's say at a company all hands, but then it needs to be announced at team meetings as well. And maybe also one-on-one between managers and their individual employees, because people need to express their concerns and they also need to know what it means for them. Yep. So just because it's announced once or just because it's coming doesn't mean people are going to be on board. And just because it's the most awesome tool ever doesn't mean people are going to use it. So they really need to know like what the benefits are, what's in it for them, and they need to hear that. Now, I've seen anywhere from 7 to 21 times. So I would err on the side of multiple times. Yeah. I call it the drip feed approach, tell them again, tell them. I know even for me, like if I might get an email about an offer. Sometimes it needs to come through 3 or 4 times before I go, I really do need to click on that. Like first time I go, I need to click on that, and then it's gone, Yeah. But I need to see it over and over again. And so we need to not assume that one big announcement's gonna do the trick.
Yeah. And I think the other thing for that as well, why somebody brings a service or a product on board that person has determined the value, right? Because they've done the evaluation themselves. The other person may not actually spend that much time in that service or that technology, and that's a really interesting one, because I loved what you said about how do we help them explore the value, but how do we hit the immediate value? One that's curated. Use that word curate, which I use all the time. We've really got to curate the personalization of what it means to me, to allow us to then create the idea of how I can add value to others, whether it's the team, the company.
Yeah, we need to map that out.
Yeah. And also allows the other part of this journey as well is that everyone learns differently, and the speed of learning is not all the same. And I think sometimes we just get so focused on, well, everyone should actually learn at the same speed, and what I give one person, it should resonate with 100.
Yeah, and there's some people learn visually, others more audially and kinesthetically.
So
you need to, ideally it's a blend of those three to really help with the learning.
So let me out, and I'm going to ask you a personal question, so I hope you don't mind.
Please dive in.
From your leadership journey, how have you evolved over time to get to where you're going and to ultimately write this great book to help product and service providers become great at how they actually build loyal clients? Yeah, I can see it's in the background as well. So you've got a great promo in the background. Onboarding Matters by Donna Weber.
Thank you, Martin. So I think the main thing for me was I saw trends of things that were happening or not happening. And I was just like, why isn't anyone addressing this? Like customer onboarding. Like there was not much focus on the beginning of the customer journey. It was all about the renewals, especially when customer success started. And it was just like, it was so obvious to me, like, why isn't anyone talking about this? And so I realized like, oh, I need to talk about that, So I would say, as a leader, not waiting for others to talk about it. And when I worked within companies, not asking for permission, asking, you ask for forgiveness. So for example, I jumped in and saw gaps and I just started addressing them. And then, at one company, that started our whole customer success focus and organization. So don't wait for permission. Just dive in. If you see that there's a need, there may not be a job description. It may not be a manager saying, could you address this? Sometimes it's up to you just to dive in and address things and see what you learn. And then that was transformational for our entire company.
Yes.
And then that was the seeds for my own business and my book.
Yeah. Fantastic. And from a leadership, if you were to go back many years, let's say many years, I've got it, 2 decades maybe, and we go back, what would be the leadership advice you would give yourself then that you can take from what you've learned over that period?
Well, the thought that comes to my mind is writing. So long before I wrote a book, I started writing articles, and there was a day where, and I write in a journal every morning, and I think best when I have pen to paper. I have my notebook here. I'm like busy, we'll talk and an idea will come in my head. I'm always writing notes. I feel like kind of, empty-handed if I don't have I need pen and paper nearby. And I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, I was writing in my journal one morning, and it was like, I am a writer. That's what I do. I am a writer. Maybe I wasn't published yet, but that is how I process information. And then, realize that the writing is what helps me articulate what I have to say, that it helps me see what engages me, is right, gets excited about, and then I share it, and I get to see what resonates. And so whether you're writing a book or writing an article or writing a presentation, it's really paying attention to what excites you, what sparks joy, if you follow the KonMari method. But it was like an awareness that I'm a writer. So maybe if I and I've been writing in a journal since probably grade school. So maybe if I could speak to my 20-year younger self, to just really like go, Donna, you're a writer, like to really own that
Yes.
earlier. That might have been, I don't know if that would have changed things, but there was something like that, something like really like validated inside me. Oh, I'm a writer.
Yeah. Well, the other thing you said as well, which I love, was you were saying nobody's talking about this, right? How to transform new customers into loyal champions. Like that tagline that you have is just phenomenal. And no one was talking about this. So that was your calling, that I was going to talk about this. And it was what you actually had created in your younger self, and then evolved that over time, became what you chose to do.
And so to listen,
become an expert.
I think it's important to listen. Yeah, those things kind of bubble up inside, and that it's like things that seem so obvious to me that weren't obvious to others. Like, okay, then that's where I need to focus.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. So as we wrap up, what are some advice that you would give your clients in relation to how to transform new customers into loyal champions? That if they're not doing it today, that they should really think about what they should do in the next coming months to ensure that they go on that journey.
Well, the number one thing is to listen to your customers, to know what your customers want and need. So, for example, I talked to the customers of one company I work with, and what we found, the company was busy building out self-paced content.
Yeah.
But when I interviewed customers, what was really transforming their businesses was instructor-led training, where they learned the concepts and context about this. So this is a workflow, a process automation platform. So it wasn't just about learning the software platform. It was about understanding, well, what is a workflow? And during the class, the instructor-led class, they talked about what's the workflow for poaching an egg, and you map that out. And so that started changing people's mindsets, and they looked everywhere they looked was like, oh, here's another workflow. And they were able to transform the business with this software because their mindset shifted. So, when I was at my prior company that I worked at, internally, there was an assumption that all of our customers were really needed technical expertise. Every customer was a special snowflake. And I called BS on that. And I interviewed 10 customers, and over, I heard the same thing. We don't need technical expertise. We need a quarterback. So in the US, it's someone who runs defense. We need a quarterback who's going to guide the journey. I heard that over and over. And even though internally there was an assumption, and that assumption was wrong. So by listening to customers, we're able to provide a more of a kind of strategic account owner than this very expensive success, technical expert, which really limited our ability to scale. It didn't mean we didn't have technical experts available to engage customers when they needed them, but that meant we could start to scale. So so we need to, the number one thing is pick up the phone, start a Zoom meeting, and then ask a few open-ended questions and listen and see what trends appear.
Yeah, no, I love that. Hey, Donna, thank you very much for joining us. I've talking about pen and paper, and we're all about ideation at StratApp, so ideas and creation of energy and things like that. I've learned a lot from you, so I just want to say thank you very much. If you want to reach out to Donna, you can go to Donna Weber, DonnaWeber.com. And I've checked out your website. It's awesome. And if it's something that our listeners really want to know how to actually build that loyal client journey, I thoroughly recommend talking to you, because guess what? I am going to be talking to you straight after this call.
Thank you. And I hope to meet you in Brisbane in person one day.
Yeah, well, that's my hometown right behind me. So, well, as I said, one of the last places I went to before the pandemic was your beautiful hometown as well. We love visiting San Francisco area. And well, thank you very much for joining us, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Martin. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Donna.